So there we go. We are on and we are live. Well, welcome everybody to today's local government education program provided by the University of Illinois Extension. My name is Mike Delaney and I'm a community and economic development educator here in Ogle County, the northern state line region. Today, we'd like to present a webinar that's going to address the third round of Accelerate Illinois, our state's broadband infrastructure planning program. And we are so very happy to collaborate on this webinar with the Illinois Office of Broadband and the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society to share some information about the upcoming round of learning and planning related to broadband expansion. Let's begin with some quick housekeeping notes. We'll be recording today's webinar and making it available on Extension's YouTube channel. So after the conclusion of today's presentation, registered participants will receive an email with slides and a link to the recording of the webinar. If you didn't register in advance for the webinar and would like to receive the materials, please just drop your email into the chat box and let us know. As always, you're welcome at any time to pose questions in the Zoom chat space by clicking on the chat icon at the lower center of the Zoom screen. We'll review those questions in a Q&A session after the presentations are completed. Presenters, if at any time, however, during the presentation you see a question you'd like to respond to in real time, please feel free to jump in and do that. Now I'd like to introduce our presenters today, all of whom will be familiar to followers of the LGE webinar series. First, I'll introduce Adrianne Benton Furniss. Adrianne is the Executive Director, a board member, and a trustee of the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society, which is a private foundation based in the Chicago area. Benton promotes the principle that everyone in the U.S. must have access to the infrastructure of opportunity, namely open, affordable, high-performance broadband, and the skills to make use of it, if we are to become a more equitable society. Joining her in the presentation is Robbie McBeath, a 2013 graduate of the University of Illinois in media studies, who serves as a program and communications coordinator with the Illinois Broadband Lab, where he helps lead the Accelerate Illinois and Illinois Connected Communities programs, and authors the bi-weekly Illinois Broadband Connections newsletter. We'll also be joined by Matt Schmit, the Deputy Director for Broadband within the Illinois Department of Commerce and, within the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and administers the state's Office of Broadband and its various grant programs. So Matt will be joining us later. Adrianne, I believe the podium is yours.
Thank you, Mike, for that wonderful introduction. And in fact, I'm going to be very brief because Mike was so thorough in his introduction of me. But again, I'm the Executive Director of the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society. I've been very happy to be a collaborator with the Illinois Office of Broadband in the activities that Mike outlined, which are the Illinois Connected Communities program. We did 2 years of that program. The Accelerate program, Robbie's going to talk about that later today, but we've done 2 cohorts in the last year plus. And the Illinois Broadband Connections newsletter, which we urge you all to sign up for. If you're not already a subscriber, Robbie will drop in the link in the chat, which kind of gives you a summary of all things broadband happening in the state, and then also gives you a taste of the kind of resources that Benton provides to a national audience, because primarily until we started to work in Illinois, our aim was really to educate policymakers at the federal level about broadband and the need for, as we said, the infrastructure of opportunity. I will end by saying, and as an introduction to Robbie, that all broadband is local. And so our belief that communities need to be involved to determine their broadband futures and to have a voice in how broadband is deployed in their communities is the basis for these programs that we've been doing in Illinois, and which we've actually also run in both Ohio and Arkansas to date. So I think that the word is spreading that you've got to start with communities, get various stakeholders involved, and really come up with a vision for what the community wants as they deploy broadband or deploy better broadband in their communities. And so with that, I will introduce Robbie McBeath, who actually used to work and still works a little bit with Benton, but has moved over to the Illinois Broadband Lab to run this next couple of cohorts for Accelerate. He's going to walk you through the program through a series of slides and then turn it back over to me to talk about an agriculture-focused Accelerate type program, and then we'll turn it over and take questions from the crowd. So Robbie, over to you. Thanks everybody for being here.
Great, thank you. With my two screens set up, there's the whole presentation, everything, and I am not able to access the web browser that I thought, so I might request people on this call to provide certain links if I'm unable to. First off, I want to say thank you all for being here, for taking the time out of your noon on Wednesday here to go over this program, learn more about it. My intention is to explain the program, why it's important, why it was designed the way it is, what to expect, a little bit about the NOCO and the application process. Adrianne will talk about the kind of specific agriculture focused cohort that she mentioned, and then we'll wrap up with Q&As. So, and hopefully everybody here will get the opportunity to, ask any questions that they might have. And there's a lot of kind of off ramps that I've included to provide more information. But I encourage people, if you have immediate questions, to put them in the chat. If Adrianne or Nancy can answer them, they'll do so. Otherwise, we'll save them at the end, and we'll begin. So the Accelerate Illinois program, as Adrianne and other people have mentioned, it really is about helping communities plan to address their specific broadband connectivity challenges. So it's a 14-week course. We've already had 2 rounds specifically in Illinois. So we're opening up this application for round 3 and potentially a round 4, depending on the amount of applications that we receive. And the idea is it's a crash course that goes over what broadband is, broadband infrastructure, mapping in your communities, understanding what your specific broadband challenges are at a more granular level, doing things like mapping, survey analysis, and interviewing with providers, and then ultimately providing a strategy, a vision statement, and a presentation at the end, with the hopes of being able to set yourself up for the next step in your broadband journey, which might be contracting a feasibility study. It might be applying for Connect Illinois grants. It might be applying for federal grants. But the idea is, how do we engage the community and a community of leaders to address their broadband challenges? It has a lot of goals here, broadband infrastructure investments. So economic development, obviously, is a big one across Illinois, which is kind of why the Illinois Office of Broadband itself is under the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Broadband is a big economic development engine. Telehealth delivery is another one that a lot of participating communities focus on. Distance learning, ensuring that everybody can have access to education, obviously, particularly in the wake of the pandemic and the emergencies there. And then also civic engagement, which I think kind of works in 2 ways. One, in the sense of getting citizens the ability to be informed in an easy way. And then on the other flip side, making sure that governments themselves have the capability to communicate effectively and have the communications platforms that they need. Further, this is really about long-term community needs and long-term success. It is a short program to set communities up, but broadband investment can often be a decades long decision or plan. So it really is mostly just mobilizing and capacity building for communities to make smart and wise decisions about their unique challenges. So as I mentioned, there have been 2 previous cohorts in this year already, one that was in February and one that started in May. And so we're hoping to start round 3 in early January. And hopefully that's why you are all on the call, with the anticipation of applying or finding out more information and then starting. So you can see our map, we're kind of all over. There are some that kind of were a multi-county unit. There were some that were more like the city of Springfield, more condensed, and then others, the typical county region. So just a quick, review of the approach. This is not a grant program itself. This is a NOCO, a notice of collaboration opportunity, in which your team will receive 30 hours of expert consultation and facilitation by myself and other broadband leaders that will be coming in, and the great team at the University of Illinois Extension, helping to manage all the communication and the infrastructure required for that. And as I've touched on, vision statements, community surveying and mapping analysis, interviewing your local internet service providers, developing a strategic plan, looking to target capital dollars to support infrastructure, and finally, one deliverable will definitely just be a final presentation to other cohort team members, and then potentially other community governing boards in your area. So it's a lot to cover, but it's organized, and we've seen a lot of success, I think, in the first 2 rounds. And I think the tight time frame actually works to everyone's advantage, where it becomes a thing that everybody can focus on. So what are some of those commitments within those 14 weeks? Basically, the main one is a 2-hour meeting every week. It'll probably be 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. on Thursdays, could be Wednesdays or Tuesdays, and we're going to be figuring that out with the other cohort as well. But generally speaking, if you're thinking, okay, will I and my county participate? You will definitely need to commit to that time frame. The first hour being your typical curriculum learning opportunity with a variety of subjects. You see kind of a rough outline on the left. Things like broadband financing tools, conducting feasibility studies, what programs and funding ability or funding opportunities are out there. All those sorts of things will be covered in the first hour. The second hour is to basically work through either a task or an assignment that for that week, or to strategize about upcoming plans. Each community will have a dedicated member to help guide them. You're not going to kind of be on your own. There's definitely involvement from leadership, but with the big kind of asterisk that we really want this to be about community leadership. And so you can take a variety of different avenues. It is about ensuring that people step up within the community to lead their teams and to ultimately lead their communities toward the broadband future that they envision. And then there will be materials to review outside of the actual weekly meetings. They might be recorded webinars or selected articles or assignments, kind of like homework, which just helps keep everything organized so that we can be most effective during those weekly meetings. So in the application, you'll notice that cities, villages, counties, regional areas, those are all eligible applicants. But we definitely, in general, have a focus at the county level. And you know that might be one of the main questions that people have, kind of why do we have a county level focus for this Accelerate program? And I'm borrowing this from the previous consultant, Bill Coleman, who helped design this program and lead the first 2 rounds. And he says, county governments combine the self-interest and organizational capacity to spur broadband deployment at meaningful scale. And so how this looks is that counties often have, greater leadership or control or effective use over things like budgets, things like relationships across jurisdictions, in the sense that they can, set large scale plans and strategies downward to municipalities, townships, and schools. But at the same time, have that communication upward into regional planning commissions, state and federal agencies, things like that. So when you're talking about broadband infrastructure, which is the main goal of this Accelerate program, counties sit, at least in Illinois, at a really, really good seat to be able to kind of pull the right levers that you need and strategize effectively. Same with the connection to the citizenry and convener on key community issues. All of those things help with broadband infrastructure deployment. Further, this is also from Bill, the idea of counties are in a good position to spur deployment. You see those different aspects there of all of those things on the left, I think, are just all the sort of details that are really, really nice to have when you start planning particular broadband infrastructure projects. So as you're thinking about developing your community's team and participating, think about both of these areas around what leaders in our county could be representative of these areas and serve on our steering committee team. So public safety, IT professionals, engineers, all of these things, are assets in themselves available to counties, but also people within the counties that have these specialties being on your team is really important. I hope that was clear for everybody. I think you can follow up with further questions, but it's just this idea of, all of these things kind of intersect at the county level that you might not necessarily get at the small municipal level and the village level, but then also might be too fragmented when you look beyond the county level. So the question of why counties, and then I think the question of why community engagement. So I think these are two really, really great quotes from people. So I'm actually going to read them. These are both kind of people in the philanthropic space that have helped get Accelerate off the ground and spread to different communities. So there's two quotes here. Active engagement of community leadership is essential so that broadband infrastructure investments meet long-term community needs, says Bernadine Joslin, who directs Blandin Foundation's Public Policy Engagement Program area. Community broadband planning is complicated. Accelerate simplifies the process by breaking down its many parts. And I think that solidifies what we're saying. It's a 14-week program. It helps break down a complicated process to simplify it and see more effective strategies at the county level. This next one from Angie Cooper, who helped fund the initial two cohorts here, she says, with unprecedented federal funding to increase access to high-speed internet, it is important for local communities to have the tools necessary to create a plan to ensure their residents are connected as soon as possible. Heartland Forward is proud to work alongside our partners to provide resources for local leaders and community members so communities in the heartland have the support they need. Which hits on the other big thing about community engagement is most of you on this call are probably aware there's a lot of federal money and state money for infrastructure grants that will be materializing most likely this year and certainly in 2024 and 2025. So the question becomes, how do we get ourselves organized to make a case for those funds? How do we establish the relationship with, for example, internet service providers so that we can join them on a matching grant for infrastructure? If we're interested in funding it ourselves, how do we go about that? Who do we contact? So basically, there is a lot of future money to spur broadband investment, but it will require plans, it will require organizations, it will require community input. So Accelerate, literally accelerates that process for communities to get that done. So just a very quick preview of some things that you can expect. These are two of the worksheets that are in the Accelerate guidebook that we'll be using as our framework for the curriculum. And I chose these, I think, because they're two of the most requested and most interesting ones that we see internet traffic and things go to, and we've seen posted on other sites, which is interviewing internet service providers. A lot of communities and counties don't know where to start. They might not have a relationship. And if you're trying to do expansion, the first thing to do, I think, is to make sure you are talking to the right people of where broadband is or isn't, and what their plans are for expansion, opening the doors to those conversations. I mean, literally just sitting down with internet service providers and having those conversations can, produce remarkable results for counties. So there's a worksheet in here to kind of help guide and kind of spur some questions that your team might want to ask internet service providers. And on the right, we have the Communicating to Achieve the Broadband Vision worksheet. So this is an example of something that we'll go through when you're trying to determine, well, what is it exactly that we're trying to achieve? You know, like universal broadband might be our goal, but is there something more specific about our community or county that we have? Do we know that there's a particular group that we're going to be presenting to that would be effective to have a vision? So these types of worksheets are what you're going to be going through in the 14 weeks. And if you want more information on that, you can kind of preview the guidebook that's on the Benton's website coming up. So to hopefully inspire a little bit and give you a sense of, you know, what has already been achieved and what we're hoping to kind of build off of with round 3, I just wanted to go through just a few accelerate round 2 outcomes. And there are many more on top of this, but each of these I think are relevant to anybody that's participating in the program. So one of them is the survey findings. Obviously, there's new federal mapping going on, and that'll be incorporated into the Accelerate program, which is more about quantitative data. But when you do the sort of self-produced surveys, you get some of that qualitative data that can be really helpful in painting your specific broadband picture or communicating to other members of your county. And so Ogle County, you know, there was a kind of a surprise because the maps didn't necessarily show this, but there were a lot of rural residents who really only had one option, and that option was $150. And they got a lot of information on households kind of in the fringe, more rural area that were cellular only, that were very displeased. And these are things that maps kind of get at, you know, because they'll show, oh, they're covered and they're paying for this and these sorts of things, but they might be very disgruntled. And so capturing some of that sentiment can really go a long way when you're communicating with future providers or making the case to build out in certain areas. So they had they got a lot of very direct responses ultimately through their data from people dissatisfied with their internet connection. Another one will be looking at new infrastructure solutions. So each county across Illinois is going to have its unique challenges. There might be geological issues around bluffs and cliffs and trees that make it difficult, and farmlands and space. It might be urban density and clusters and a whole host of things. And so really getting a sense of like, well, what are our options available to us can be a really big benefit from the program. And so Bond County, which is just a little over 50 miles northeast of St. Louis, they realized, oh, you know, we're really not that far from a large middle mile backhaul infrastructure that's running along the highway. Is there an opportunity to basically apply for a middle mile grant to basically just kind of have it spread out and reach into townships and 3 public schools? So that's the route that they ended up kind of going toward. These sorts of things, I think, are you don't really know until you start looking into things and looking at your options. So there might be more options besides just expanding the footprint that currently exists with other providers. An organized mission statement and strategy is another one. Everybody that participated in the round 2 had unique presentations that included their survey data, their mission and vision, their key strategies. And so just that deliverable in and of itself is a really great outcome. And then I really like this quote from Bill Coleman, which is, you know, it's 14 weeks and it really does help your county become ready and in a position to get further help. And so I'm just going to read it. Through their education, information gathering, and planning efforts, the teams have built a strong foundation for community empowerment. If the next step is to seek out further consultation, Bill Coleman says, strong, educated teams can be much smarter and targeted, getting higher value from feasibility or other studies because of participation in this program. So I just kind of want to reiterate, if that's something too that people are thinking about of, oh, we need to get a feasibility study, we need to have more technical analysis, participating in this program can at least help guide you. We have a list of, you know, a whole group of people we recommend to run those feasibility studies and advisors. So it can really be a good kind of position to lay that foundation. And so I think, so with all of that, I'm gonna just point to where these applications in the NOCO sits right now. The DCEO, Illinois Office of Broadband, recently redid their website, so it might be a little bit challenging finding it. They no longer appear as high in Google search results. So I wanted to put the link here that people can copy. And Nancy was generous enough to also create a URL specifically for the Accelerate Landing Program, if it's easier for you to remember there, which is just go.illinois.edu/accelerate. That'll take you to this page that's on here that has the NOCO and the application. I think the NOCO and the application are relatively straightforward. So I'm not going to spend the time to slowly go through there, but rather encourage people to look at it, read some things. We're still going to be talking about it. So you're welcome, again, to kind of read through and ask questions, which we'll talk about at the end. But for now, I'm going to pass it to Adrianne to talk about kind of a similar program that'll be happening with particular counties that are eligible. So take it away, Adrianne.
Thanks, Robbie. That was such a great lead in. And what I'm going to be doing is talking about what I would call Accelerate-like program that is going to be aimed at select ag-focused counties. And you can see the 14 eligible counties that are listed in this. But I wanted to give a little bit of background about why Benton is involved in this and how we sort of got to this point of determining that we should be focused on involving ag in some of these community engagement programs. So Benton has a relationship with the United Soybean Board. And last year, we did a project for them, and the project was a series of recommendations about how to change federal policy to make broadband more available for farmers and farming communities. This was based on some work that United Soybean Board had done in 2019, where they really outlined the problem, the connectivity challenges that limited agricultural's economic impact and sustainability. And it was a series of facts that they determined through survey data, a very large survey response that showed that 60% of US farmers and ranchers do not believe that they have adequate internet connectivity to run their business. Many were obviously with new tractors coming off the line, 87% of farmers said they planned on or were considering incorporating more data in day-to-day decisions, but they didn't have either the broadband to do that, particularly the upload speed, which is much more important for precision agriculture, but they also didn't have any choice if they wanted to switch broadband providers. Many of them were using dial-up, cellular, satellite service, and as many of you all know who are living in these communities, the options for choice, in other words, for more competition or to be able to find a better broadband provider in these areas is very limited. So with that data, Benton went ahead and wrote a report called The Future of American Farming, Broadband Solutions for the Farm Office, Field, and Community. And we did break up that there really is a need to look at these three segments in rural counties and make some policy recommendations, which we're happy to say, many of which were incorporated in the law, the Infrastructure Investment Act that now is giving all of this money, including this issue of faster upload speeds. So many of you know that 100/20 and with Treasury money, 100/100 has been recommended. And a lot of this was because we are all, even on the Zoom call, the need for upload speed is much more important. One of the recommendations that we made to United Soybean Board, which brings me to why we're doing this program, was that it would be very important for us to do an Accelerate-like community engagement program to get farmer leaders involved in how broadband is deployed in their communities. If many of you know, the United Soybean Board is an a checkoff program. Farmers actually pay into this checkoff program that's run by USDA, and it's run by farmer leaders, a board of farmer leaders all over the country that make decisions about investment to help promote in this case, soy production and agricultural sustainability. So we proposed this program, they loved it, and so they have funded us to do this. And we have partnered up with some interesting players, which I'll talk about. So there are 14 eligible counties here listed that are very agriculturally focused in Illinois. We will pick 5 of them to field test an infrastructure planning tool, which if you go to the next slide, Robbie, we're going to talk about. There was a research team from the Illinois State University Department of Geography, Geology, and Environment. We found out that they had put together, with funding from the Illinois Innovation Network, a toolbox of GIS-derived metrics and maps that could be used by counties to guide and plan investment in rural broadband infrastructure. So it's a series. What makes this program slightly different from the program that Robbie talked about is that the tools that ISU's research team have created will be made available to counties who sign up for this program. And as I said, part of what we're trying to do here is ground truth the data that they've come up with that's pulled from the Illinois broadband maps, from the USDA's crop output data, and ground truth it through working through this program. And we will be looking at how to optimally place broadband infrastructure with another tool that the ISU team has created, which is looking at through LiDAR at how to do a combination of fiber and fixed wireless, because you're not going to put fiber in the field, you're going to bring fiber to the farm office or the farmhouse, and then use generally fixed wireless in the field, and you have to have high points, obviously, to do that. Next slide, Robbie. I think these are the partners that are listed on the right-hand side of your screen. So obviously the project is funded by United Soybean Board. We're working with the Illinois Soybean Association, which is headquartered in Bloomington. Obviously, we want everybody to go through this program and then apply for funding from the Connect Illinois infrastructure grants. Illinois Extension, here we are, we're presenting. They're going to work with us as they have worked with us on our Accelerate and Illinois Connected Communities program. And then Illinois Innovation Network, which is a partner with the Illinois Office of Broadband, was an early funder in the ISU research. I'm just going to read this one particular part of this, but this is really about when broadband providers look at the sustainability of a project and whether it is worth their investment to deploy in a particular county. They're looking at the number of subscribers and what they're paying to justify whether they can make that investment. Obviously, the CapEx cost and the ongoing OpEx. If you're applying for federal grants or state grants, you are obviously contributing to that CapEx cost. But this program is trying to demonstrate the impact of robust broadband on soy and corn crop production that can justify investments and plan and leverage infrastructure to deploy precision agriculture tools. ISU has basically come up with a series of maps that says, if you were fully served by broadband, how much more could you, a farmer, increase his bushel production and return, as in financial return, to if you had robust broadband, if you weren't suffering from not having broadband. So they're looking at an analysis of unserved areas and underserved areas, and saying if you were fully served with fast broadband, how much more could you produce on your land? And it's quite stunning what those projections are showing. And so we're really trying to help farmer leaders and farming communities leverage the unprecedented state broadband funding allocated in the IIJA, as Robbie has alluded to. This is a readiness program to get these farmers and farming communities a seat at the table, along with the county administrators and other stakeholders that Robbie outlined, whether it's schools, healthcare providers, other people interested in in trying to get better broadband in these communities. Next, Robbie. As Robbie said, there is a way to apply for this particular program. You use the NOCO for Accelerate, kind of explains what the program's all about. And then there is this Accelerate Illinois application template where you check at the bottom of page 2 whether you're one of the 14 counties that wants to apply for the agriculture-themed rural broadband infrastructure planning tool program. The programs are run very similarly. They have to have, Robbie, go to the next slide. You have to apply, next slide, Robbie. You have to apply by December 16th. You will follow a 14 to 16 week program that's very similar to the Accelerate program, but will use this series of tools that has been created by ISU to help you on your journey, to provide data for your journey, and still come out at the end with a broadband vision, and specifically with ways to cost what broadband infrastructure might look like, because you have the added tool of having these maps and LiDAR tools that will help you through this process. Again, apply by December 16th, check the box if you're interested in the rural broadband program. We will notify communities very quickly the week of December 19th. And then the programs will start likely in mid-January, run 14 to 16 weeks. And we'll be picking, as Nancy says, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, 8:30 to 10:30. The big important thing for communities who are interested in both of these programs is to think who should be on your team and can attend this sessions. It's really important to get at least 8, up to 15. We've seen teams come in at even 20, but to have a robust team of participants, because there is work that we assign and the work that the team does over the course of the program. You don't want to come into this with 3 people. It's really difficult to do the program unless you have a robust team. So as you're signing up, you should begin to think about what that team is going to look like. And with that, Robbie, I think these slides are going to, I know all these links go by quickly. The slides are going to be made available, and so is the recording. There are ways to ask specific questions. If you have an application-specific question, you go to broadband@illinois.gov. If you want to talk about the regular Accelerate program, Robbie's your man. And if you want to talk about the ag cohort specific questions, Bill Coleman, who's going to be running those cohorts on behalf of Benton, will be your point person there. And we've put emails for everybody. Now I see there are 13 questions, Robbie.
Yeah, I'm going to try to go through quickly, but definitely please continue to share in the chat. I'm going to leave this slide up, and I'll go through in case anyone has a question about one of the previous ones. So I'm just going to start. I apologize if I don't get to everyone's or do it correctly, but Dr. Ron Suarez has questions around what about helping communities to form cooperatively owned ISPs. So yeah, I think that can be a big undertaking. We go through looking at different options around public-private partnerships, looking at existing electric co-ops that might be in your area. So that's part of the determination of kind of like, okay, who is providing broadband in our area or similar services like electricity, as you mentioned here, like electricity in the 1930s. And so with some of those with some of those success stories that we talked about, that often was smaller electric co-ops basically expanding, or former telephone co-ops expanding service out into other areas, often with the help of grants. So that's certainly in conversation. If you want to do your own kind of municipally owned network, that's something that we'll talk about and explore and kind of determine whether or not that's the wise step for your county. And then I have, how might people in other states who share this vision collaborate? Great question. For now, I think that rests on the publication that you see on your screen here, the Accelerate one. Obviously, anybody, that's a national publication from the Benton Institute, so anyone can kind of take a look at that and what we're doing. In addition to Accelerate has expanded to other states, as Adrianne had mentioned, Arkansas and Ohio most successfully, and I think there's some others coming along. Same with, are your materials licensed as Creative Commons versus copyright? They are Creative Commons indeed. So you can kind of take and use them. There's a link in the Accelerate to a Google Drive in which you can kind of access a lot of the worksheets and documents that we'll be using. From Leighton Olson, I'm going to try to read this quickly. Community. Yes, so this is a question around kind of how are community colleges and partnerships used in digital economy areas. I have my initial answer that I'll give, but Adrianne might be able to do further, which is the two things are, yes, obviously engaging with the community colleges in your area can be a huge help, which we have seen in the Accelerate program with the Kaskaskia College system. So we would recommend talking to George Evans, I believe is his name, because he kind of really knows that area. He's spoken on it before and actually probably will speak in the next curriculum. And then in addition, there's another program from the Illinois Office of Broadband called Broadband Ready, which is about organizing, which Adrianne Pickett on this call helps run, which is about organizing Illinois through its 10 economic regions and sort of mobilizing the universities on there to use their resources and their positions around infrastructure and equity issues. So I recommend contacting Adrianne Pickett to learn more about that. We have one.
And actually, Robbie, I would absolutely agree that as you put your teams together, if you have community colleges or universities in your area and you can bring them into your team, you should go for it. The university can really, or community college can provide so much value add. And so we have found that has been just a great way. I mean, in addition to sort of superintendents and head of technology for the high schools, it's really been great if we can get higher ed involved. So, yeah.
I'm going to skip Dr. Ron Suarez is just because it seems like there's a couple questions around resources around ag stuff. So we'll kind of maybe do that in one swoop. So I'll just put a pin in that one for now. One question here, can counties not currently listed apply as well? I presume for the ag cohort with their profile being similar. Adrianne, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so I can say at this particular point, James, that the answer is unless you're one of the 14 counties, no. And that's because these map books have been done for the 14 counties listed. Now, if we don't get, and I see the question right under this, if not enough sign up, can a community outside of the list apply? And if yes, how will we know we can? I think somewhere in your application, my suggestion is you say, if there were slots open on the ag focused, we'd like to do it. And I could go back to ISU and ask whether it's possible to create a map book for somebody who's not on that original list. But right now we're going to have to focus on the list of 14 because that's what the data has been gathered on so far.
Excellent. And I just want to note, yeah, Adrianne has very graciously shared her email address. So if you want to ask questions, about kind of community colleges or the Broadband Ready program, you could look there. Gerald Johnson, can we discuss the concerns for resources needed to support the construction of these networks? This has largely been overlooked, and I would be happy to share some concerns with the group and provide some forethought needed when considering to place these much needed services into our communities. My initial reaction is that's a much larger conversation that might derail a little bit from more accelerate specific things. So my temporary answer would just be, if you have further clarification or things that you want to say, put them in the chat and we can maybe return to them. Adrianne, I don't know if there's anything else specific to that. Yeah, it's a big undertaking to support, just very briefly, support the construction of these networks. This is a very difficult challenge to solve. I think the best way to think about how that works in this space for Accelerate is that it is a kind of tight county-based program focused mostly on infrastructure. We have other programming and offering around digital equity, like I said, with the Broadband Ready program and a lot of these other things. And that might be a little bit part of what Accelerate does, but the main idea is just how can we sort of examine a county's network situation, connectivity situation, and look at infrastructure solutions to that, which might be fixed wireless, it might be, expanding fiber footprints, it might be expanding a middle mile network. All these sorts of things. It might be just getting into contact with a local co-op or internet service provider and getting a deal done to have them expand. So the point is, there's not going to be a one fit solution. That's kind of the whole point of these things, but a larger thing. Okay, I'm going to keep going. And
actually, I'm sorry, Robbie, let's just address Gerald Johnson's concern. I think he means specifically local resources are not being considered. Is that right, Gerald? Is that what you meant by there? And I will say that the Accelerate program does actually have a section on local financing. Mm-hmm. Some of these counties that have signed up this far used ARPA funds or are using ARPA funds. And so that, of course, is a local funding. I just wanted to make sure that that's what you meant, Gerald.
And to be honest, yeah, I think whatever information you've got that you want to share, I mean, we're all ears to hear suggestions and helpful steps to avoid penalties, investigations, etc. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Apologies, doing our best to sort of manage a collection of questions.
Thank you, Gerald. Yeah, all of that detail is great. We'll save this in the chat. Everybody who's got questions we don't address, I really appreciate. Is there a database of area ISPs that would be opening to partnering in these efforts, or a way for ISPs to join that?
So we don't have necessarily a database, but we do provide a list through our mapping of all of the known providers in an area.
Correct. And there are the associations which also list their members. But yeah, this part of what we do is Shubika Argawal, who is part of also the Illinois Broadband Lab and who has become an expert on the Illinois Broadband Map, is an amazing resource that we bring to the table to help communities with their figuring out where broadband is and isn't, and also get those provider lists to you.
Okay, so John Scrivener, I'm not sure if there's a question, but I just want to point out what, or draw attention to his comments around Connect Illinois. I know, the specifics around Connect Illinois are still kind of being worked out with those grant programs, which will obviously kind of keep Accelerate cohort members in the loop. But I think the best way for everybody to stay up to date so far is the Illinois Broadband Connections newsletter with that link. Okay. James Renshaw, in our conversation with potential broadband partners, our county has learned that co-ops will serve only those locations that are already co-mark customers. This means that locations served by Amherst are going to be left out. Do you have a solution in this scenario? I think it means alternative options at the end of the day, to see what other providers and co-ops exist in that area. There are opportunities for, fixed wireless community solutions and applying for those sorts of things that we can explore. So yeah, that's I think kind of a specific, you're welcome to reach out to me or Bill. But that's kind of one of those things. I think that's kind of a challenging problem that, through applying and going through the program, I think we, would be discussed.
James, which county are you from, James? You can either put it in the chat or come off of mute if you're still here on the call.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Jackson County.
Oh, you're Jackson. Okay, great. Then we should continue to talk offline. Thank you. The person who mentioned WISPA, that's a great resource. That's where all of these small business broadband providers, also TCA, right, Robbie? The Rural Broadband Association is another one.
Mm-hmm.
Again, part of what the Accelerate program does is put on your radar all of these national associations that can provide resources, whether it again is sort of associations of different kinds of broadband providers, different kinds of technology providers, people who are focused on digital inclusion or adoption. So there are a variety. That's sort of what Benton does, is kind of put people together. But we found, for instance, that coming out of some of our programs, people joined these national organizations and became very active in the dialogue, about what was going on in their community, and have really helped influence some of these conversations at a national level. So we'll continue to do that in both of these programs.
WISPA was actually founded in Illinois, for those of you who were not aware. I was the founding president of WISPA, and also served as the legislative. I served on the legislative subcommittee within the Broadband Deployment Council under Pat Quinn, and so I have some policymaking background and experience, and I'm now serving as a vice president of broadband lending for a national commercial lending bank. But I still live in Illinois. I'm an Illinois resident, voter, born and raised here. I also work feverishly in attempting to streamline processes involving financing for small business broadband providers. I can tell you that they have been very key to bringing what broadband we do have in rural areas across the United States. Even though there are swaths of the state and the country at large that are not as well served with broadband as they need to be, these small business broadband providers, 2,800 of them is the best estimate we have currently. These guys will be a great resource to accessing true solutions to bringing broadband into the rural geographies and supporting them with good services. And I would ask that we all please try to see if we can help alleviate the letter of credit hurdle for them, because it's a massive hurdle. I supply funding in the millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars to broadband companies in the United States. And I write letters of credit for RDOF, for CAF2, and these letters of credit are not going to be written for these small business broadband guys if we don't get some help there. I just wanted to share that.
John, there are a lot of people trying to get rid of that provision, just so you know, and I'm sure you're aware of that. It would be helpful to us if you put your contact information for Robbie and me. It sounds to me like you could be a prospective speaker on one of our sessions. So
I can provide a pure justification for the elimination of letter of credit requirement.
Yeah,
Adrianne, Robbie, if I'll jump in here for just a moment.
Right.
At this point in time, I'm going to launch a quick poll question, single question, just to collect some information from our participants today. And we're coming to the end of our time, but wanted to make sure that we don't leave any questions unaddressed. Is there anybody out there who has a question or an issue that they'd like to raise that hasn't yet been touched on by Adrianne or Robbie?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that the person from Julie. Yeah, that's another great example of if you want to put your contact and get in touch about having a conversation, if you're noticing that there seems to be massive delays and regulatory issues of the planning process happening without looking at the physical build causes and incorporating that earlier in the process. Yeah, we're all ears, if to learn basically from the counties across Illinois, the obstacles and things that they've faced. So we can kind of connect with that. Or again, if you want to get information out there, consider us a communication channel to a lot of counties working on broadband infrastructure.
and finally, Robbie, I would just like to thank, I'm always amazed when I get on the call how engaged people are. There are a lot of really knowledgeable people asking great questions and contributing in the chat. And we're very open to being contacted. Please ask a question. If we don't know, we'll put you to somebody who does. And so there's, just want to make sure that everybody knows that there's an open communication channel. And particularly as people want to apply for this NOCO, we want to encourage you to reach out with any questions you have, again, with this series of emails. James, I've got you down here from Jackson County. So we'd of course like you to apply for the regular Accelerate program, but also note again your interest in the ag focused program. I guess, Mike, are we wrapping up at this point? I see we have, goodness, 2 minutes left.
We are bumping up against the end of our time. Unless anybody else has any pressing questions, as you know, you'll be able to reach both Adrianne and Robbie with their contact information for better or for worse, they'll be happy to answer your questions on an ongoing basis.
It's true that a recording and the slides will be sent to registrants.
That is correct. Right. Well, let's just go ahead and wrap it up. And again, on behalf of the University of Illinois Extension, Robbie, Adrianne, thank you again for your time and efforts on behalf of this initiative. It's to the benefit of communities and counties across the state, and it's a very valuable service. As Robbie just reminded us, and as I mentioned earlier, if you registered for the webinar, you'll receive the presentation materials and a link to the recording in a follow-up email. If you didn't register in advance, drop us a note or drop something in your email in the chat right now, and we'll get you on that mailing list. I'd also like to invite you to visit our website to register for future webinars. A little commercial here at go.illinois.edu/LGE. For example, we have one brewing, pardon the pun, for tomorrow at 1 p.m. on SIU's Fermentation Science Institute. And coming up next week on Wednesday, November 16th at noon, we also have another interesting and timely one, a look back at the 2022 midterm elections with SIU's Dr. John Jackson. And as always, you can use the same resource to find the recordings of a host of our prior presentations on a wide variety of topics. So please make use of that resource. Thank you again, to echo what Adrianne said earlier, to all of you for attending today's webinar. Have a great day, and we hope to see you back for future presentations.